Thanks for coming out tonight. As many of you know, we've done this before. This is our 10th annual meeting. And all of this started with a vision, with a lot of folks pitching in, working hard. And I wish two of the individuals that really helped get this whole vision started and making this dream a reality one is Bill Clark, Wilson Clark, from Wells, Vermont, a long-time maple sugar producer and a long-time president of Rutland County Farmers Market and the Vermont Farmers Market. And then very recently, Alan Gartner passed away, and it would not be possible with Alan and his brother Ed and their family. They believed in what we were doing, and they made it a reality by holding the note and believing that we could accomplish this. That vision has not ended. We have accomplished a few parts of that vision, but the vision is evolving and it is large. We are talking about recreating a local food system that will feed our citizens and also create a healthier community. And I think anybody that has been part of this organization and attended some of our events knows what change looks like. And we've done it on a shoestring budget because all of the community of Rutland has made this happen. And Heidi knows every one of those windows was donated by somebody in this community. We raised almost $200,000 and renovated that building, Farmers Hall, in 4 months. That is intentional action by the community. And we're not done yet. We're going to renovate this entire campus, and that vision constantly evolves as we get more input from the community, as we get more input from the producers, and better recognize what both of their needs are. And my job is made a lot easier, and I can go back to farming a little bit more consciously because we have developed an amazing staff, resources from our community, and we've also, our best resource is standing right next to me, Heidi Lynch. A little aside, Heidi and I met when you were in high school, working on my farm. And when she came back from India, correct? We had a conversation. And out of that conversation came one of our pilot programs called Pharmacy. And Heidi ran that program and built that program into basically a model for the rest of the state. And freely shared, and didn't charge, but freely shared that information to make that program come to life in Addison County, and now is working on the state level. Everyone Eats. That happened like that as COVID hit. And we pivoted. And how many folks did we feed, Heidi?
Thousands. Every week.
Every,
for
yeah.
2 years.
So,
Grace.
and Grace has been running that program. And Melinda over here in the corner has been running the farm-based experiential learning program. And Emma is now taking over the reins of pharmacy. And Heidi is now our voice and our leader. And I couldn't imagine anybody more talented. I would venture to say that we have one of the best, if not the best, executive director in the state of Vermont.
That's great.
Yeah. So I'd like to turn it over to Heidi, who is incredibly value-driven. What this place is a change agent, not defaulting to the broken systems, but coming up with new ways to serve people, because Heidi and I have talked about it. It is not about VFFC. It is about the people in our community and the producers in our community. If we do that, then we serve our mission.
That's right.
Heidi,
Thanks,
thank
Greg. Yep. Oh, shucks, Greg. I'll do my best to project here. Hope you can hear me. And I think, as Greg said, we got to know each other when I was looking for a summer job and found it on his farm. And then sometimes I say my path, since then is all his fault, because you can just get hooked when you see plants, growing, and just understand our food in that way. So that I feel like I carry with me in all this work that we do. And for tonight, we just, we're celebrating 10 years. We have our booklet here, so there's some, of you were part of making this happen, and we're pulled together quotes and stories from everyone that helped found the Farmers Food Center and kind of retell the story of our beginnings as we're here now at 10 years and sort of at a next era of growth. So thank you all for being here tonight to celebrate together what we've all built together, and you all know that from your presence and your participation and all the ways that you've showed up. And like Greg said, we all just show up as community to make a new food system and make it viable. What a year it's been, this particular year. I think we all know that. We're sitting here under our solar shed, which will be one of the buildings that we renovate in the future. And we've grown our programs, as Greg mentioned. So this year we've worked on strengthening our organization. So doing things like making an official executive director position was our first, improving the learning environment. As Greg said, we've been serving thousands of meals on the campus since August of 2020, and we're still serving thousands of meals, so that need continues. All that food produced by local restaurants and vendors and using local ingredients. Our online market that also started in 2020 is still continuing. We have a steady following, and it's another avenue now for accessing local foods and sales for our producers, and that was the goal of it. This year has been clearly marked by us also moving forward in our increasing the capacity for small farm and food businesses in our region to thrive through continuing to renovate and adaptively reuse the buildings on our campus. So as we all know, we, in doing the due diligence of that process, are dealing with the environmental cleanup. That's a necessary part of it. And it's moving forward. All the pieces have been in action, since we discovered that need, and we're all, dedicated to getting that open in time for the Winter Farmers Market. We still have to cross a few bridges to get there, and but we're moving in that direction. So we will. It's all positive, all for the positive reasons in the community, and I thought I wanted to just actually share a couple of quotes from some of our partner organizations in the state, just in the spirit of, VFFC is just the little Rutland node of a whole food system in the communities throughout the state that are working on these types of projects and, building capacity in the way that we are for improving our food system. So one of the quotes came from our friends at Salvation Farm. So they've been running gleaning programs in the state for years now. And they write, "In this time when the world seems full of uncertainties and insecurities, weather is increasingly unpredictable and intense, the costs of food and fuel keep rising, and things we are used to getting easily are not always there. What can we do? Together we can ensure abundance is available to all. Food is a connector affecting the environment, our well-being, and local to global economies. Food is liberating, food provides hope, and food provides hope when so much feels outside of our control. And then the second quote comes from our friends at Rural Vermont, and this one I just felt spoke to what how we've approached both the founding of this place, and I hope you'll enjoy some of the stories and quotes of a lot was overcome in getting this place renovated and being what it has been for us in the past 10 years, and then this year when the challenges that we're working through now arose, we did the same thing we did at the beginning. And that was, so this quote from Rural Vermont that they shared just reminded me of that. And it says, "Teach me to organize, then whatever the challenge, I can join together with my peers and create solutions." So that's what we did to bring this food center to life. We're doing it now as we enter this next era. And then actually, so a second part of that quote from Rural Vermont, and Greg, you almost just said the same thing. And what you said is, they were just encouraging all of us to really see the present needs and rebuild systems instead of jumping into existing norms and structures that are rooted in broken systems. So again, that's the values that we're, the innovation that we're working from in bringing these new structures and new facilities so that the thriving, food and farm businesses in our community can succeed in that way, and that all can be fed. So I'm going to pause there, and then we're very excited that one of our board members, Philip Ackerman-Leist, is here, and he is an author, founder of the former Green Mountain College Farm, and been a leader in the food system. So Philip's just going to share a few more words with us, and just thanks again, everybody, for always showing up tonight and in all the ways you have for all the years. Thanks. Philip?
Thank you.
Yeah.
Good. Well, thanks so much. And, it's pretty extraordinary to be here and see all of this at 10 years. And because it never should have happened in so many ways. It just never should have happened. But, with Greg and others who came to the fore and just really, did what I often say is building something to the point of inevitable. How do you build something to the point where it just has to happen? And you're just so damn determined that you make it happen and you bring others on board to help make it happen. And I think that's what we see. And I was just reminded, and even talking to Heidi, as we sit here and, it's in some ways it's an imperfect setting, and yet it means that it's grounded. It's where it's supposed to be. It's at the heart of the community. It's at the backside of the community in some ways. It's a mix here that doesn't always happen. And so often when we look at local food systems and the building of things up, things aren't integrated. Very often it's the white tablecloth scene that gets disaggregated from the rest of the community. And I think we have the pleasure and the privilege of being here right in the heart of the community. And it means so much. And I wanted to reflect a little bit on kind of what it might mean from a bigger context. And some of I don't know, Heidi asked me to do this, and right now I'm pretty sober about where certain things are at the moment, and the idea is to lift us up. And so my promise is that I hope do that here by the end. But I've been doing this research and work with a good colleague, Douglas Gayton, who founded the Lexicon of Sustainability. His artworks actually just coincidentally are up here in the back, and Douglas and I have been friends and working together for about 10 years. And so we're diving into this research and looking at what's going on at the international level. And I'll give you some of the statistics, not to, because I'm trying to give you the down and bleak side, but some of it is startling, and I think it reminds us of what we're doing in this context and why it's so important. So one of the most startling that came out a couple months ago was that when you start looking at all the negative externalities, all of the things that are created that are not positives in terms of economics of the food systems around the world, the sum is $12 trillion in negative externalities is where we're at right now by this particular estimate. So, if you disagree with it, maybe we're off by 1 or 2 trillion, but it ain't good. And, the really sobering piece is that the entire global food system has a valuation of about $10 trillion. So something's really amiss when we've got this valuation that actually is less than the negative externalities that we're putting into the systems. And so it's a heavy lift, and it has to start somewhere, and it has to start somewhere like this in order to start to address some of these issues. Then I was looking at USDA Economic Research Service at some of their data for farmers. Median income for farmers in the United States right now is negative. This past week, we watched one of our friends, near me in the Meadowee Valley, who is one of the best farmers, in this region of southwestern Vermont, organic, have to disperse an organic dairy herd. And he and his family, like many others, are at the point where in order to save the farm, you have to quit farming. In order to keep the farm in the family, you have to stop farming. And there are multiple examples of that and different conversations I've had with different farmers who are at that juncture point right now and trying to figure out, what do we do? How do we tackle this? When we look at the U.S. food dollar, that 16% of that food dollar goes to farmers nationally. Just 16% of every dollar that's put out there. That's different here at VFFC and with the farmers markets and what goes on. And I'll talk about that a little bit more. When we look at organic research, 1/100% of all of the land and funding that goes into agricultural research around the United States goes toward organic agriculture. 1/100%. I mean, it's stunning. When you look and this is a world I never thought I'd dive into and look into, and I'm not trying to be super dark, but I think we need to know what it is we're up against and what we're dealing with in the context that we live within. And that is when you start looking at all the venture capital in the United States that was put toward what people call agri-food tech. It was estimated right now, and they're still putting the numbers together, $32 billion. $32 billion for venture capital in the United States, which is dedicated to agri-food tech, which is everything from lab-based meat, other alternative proteins, robotic bees, different apps that are being used, different satellite technology and other things. And I'm not anti-tech, but there's an immense amount of money which is going toward these things, that may or may not make sense in terms of the food system. And it's not coming to places like this. And my argument in the end here is that we really need to make sure that we're paying close attention to what happens to organizations like VFFC and the farmers market, everything that's happening in our communities, because we're up against the big dogs. Bill Gates, this past week, it became very clear through some of the data that he's now the largest he's the largest owner of farmland in the United States. And we can go on a totally different topic and talk about why that might be and what's going on. And I'm not a conspiracy theorist, and part of what I'm doing these days is working with some of the folks who are trying to rectify some of this from the inside and see how we can actually take on these things. But what gives me hope, what really makes me feel positive about things, is when we see things happen at VFFC and elsewhere where we know that it's changing the game in some ways. So, undoubtedly the scale is off, the scales are tipped, the people who are supposed to be the scale inspectors are in the pockets of the wrong entities in a lot of cases, but we are doing what we can to change that scale, and it needs to be more intense. And I think part of what's happened over the course of the last really year in particular, in working with Welch and Leahy and Sanders and those offices, is trying to tip those scales in the favor of farmers, of community, of nutrition, and that's just really important work. Because, we've been doing this stuff in Vermont now, where we've been really happy, and we should be when we get 25,000 or 100,000. That's not going to do it. When you look at the overall economics of what's out there, it does have to be done on a larger scale, and we do have to really direct funding to our communities and not to some of the other places where that money's not necessarily going to be put in the pockets where it can be most utilized. So, I was reminded as I was thinking about this of my father. We just had his memorial service a couple weeks ago, and he was a Presbyterian minister down south in North Carolina. And there were lots of stories that were told there, and one that I think is relevant here is, he would always ride we had a manse there at the church, and he would ride his bike around under the street lamps with the parking lot at the church to get exercise after long and stressful days. And he was out riding like really late one night at about 11 o'clock, and he came upon, as we usually did. It was actually the church where he served was very much just like this. We were behind all the textile mills there in North Carolina, and that was his job, was to really be a pastor to the people who were the textile mill workers. And so we also always saw lots of interesting things there. And so my father's riding his bike, and the cemetery was right beside us, and so he comes upon this guy who sort of stumbles up out of the cemetery, and he's at least 2 sheets to the wind, and my dad checks in with him. He says, "You doing okay?" And the guy said, "I'm so glad to see you." My dad said, "Well, I'm glad to see you too, and I'll try to I hope you get home if you need to." He said, "No, this is exactly where I wanted to find you." And my dad said, "Well, we're just here under the street lamp in the parking lot above the cemetery." And he said, "Exactly, because this is where I want to be buried." And my dad said, "Well, it's not quite the cemetery." He said, "I want to be under the light because I'm scared of the dark." And I think, in some ways the point to be made there is sometimes we just need to know there's a light, that there's a light there, that, it's there all the time no matter what. And I think in many ways that's sort of what VFFC is this light that continues to be there, no matter what. And when you look at the past year, again, building to the point of inevitable, really most organizations a lot just would never have made it through this year. And it's not just because of VFFC, and it's not just because of all the stalwart work that Heidi and Greg and others have done. It's everybody in the community who's come in behind and contributed, and has really that's shown the value, and that has no economic value, and we don't have to attribute an economic value to that. But it's more valuable than anything we could possibly have, I think. And so, I think the lesson here in so many ways is we've created an ethical middle, for lack of a better word. I was doing research for a book a couple of years ago, Rebuilding the Food Shed, at the very end of the book, and so then me being a procrastinator, that's when I decided to write the introduction. It's like, well, I don't know what to write right now, and so I just playing around on the internet and trying to figure out, how do I try to wrap this up even though it's the introduction. And I stumbled upon this map, and it was a map from 1920, and it was put out by the Armour Food Corporation at that point in time, the Armour Meatpacking Company. And it was a map that was sent around the United States. It was sent to post offices, schools, libraries. It was placed all over, and it was beautiful. It's this gorgeous map, and there's still one of these days I'm going to buy one. There are just a couple floating around that are still out there. And the map basically depicted a specialized view of the United States that the Armour Meatpacking plant had proposed. So when you see this map and you see sort of the topography on it, you see that certain livestock planted in one place. So pigs are up around Cincinnati, and then you've got the cattle that are out west, you've got the dairy cattle that are in the northeast, you've got sheep out west, and then you've got the goats down south. And so it's a beautiful depiction and rendering of what was really kind of Armour's dream. Because what Armour wanted to do, and there was another graphic that went with it, and it wasn't just Armour, it was the meatpacking plants. This was the time when the specialization was coming and the railroads were working, and Armour actually created the first refrigerated rail cars in the United States and got to the point they actually started producing their own refrigerated rail cars because they were trying to bring everything there into Chicago, do the processing. And it's all really a pretty extraordinary story. But one of the other graphics that was that came out with this map was one that it's got farmers on one side, consumers on the other, and the Armour Meatpacking plant is in the middle, and it's a bridge. And that's what Armour wanted to do. It wanted to be in the middle. They wanted to be the bridge between the farmers and the consumers. So what happens in that bridge? In that bridge, by building that bridge, that's where farmers start to just lose cent by cent by cent until they get to the point of only collecting 16 cents on the dollar because somebody else is in the middle. And it's the people in the middle that always not only survive, but typically thrive. When the economic situation goes down, we look at the dairy processors. Farmers are hurting on one end, consumers are paying more. Dairy processors are the ones who are always seem to be stable and getting their take. And so I think that's part of what we're up against, is really creating this new middle, this new in-between. And sometimes it makes sense for farmers to sell directly, as they do here. Sometimes it makes sense for farmers to have some help, have a boost, in ways that VFFC has done here over the past couple of years. And that really, that for me is what makes so much sense. It's these community nexus points, and that's really what VFFC is and what VFFC does. And the USDA and academics have turned all of this into what they call intermediated markets. There are these intermediaries that are in between, and they're getting the biggest take on the dollar. But in this case, I think what we're trying to do, and the balancing act, and it's hard, and we have these hard conversations, is how does VFFC get its share in order to perpetuate all of this good work? So you can't just always depend on grants to do every single thing that you do. But how can that be modest enough so that the farmers really get the greatest return and the consumers get the greatest value? So, we're up against a lot. I think it's challenging, but there's not just hope here, and there's not just vision here. There's grit, and things have actually happened and have continued through sort of the worst of the worst in some ways. We've made it through. And when I sort of think about dashboard metrics and kind of the things that look good, I started thinking about really the metaphor of kind of, here we are, we're all driving this vehicle together, and in front on the dashboard we're figuring out how far have we come. We've come 10 years. Where's the fuel? Well, thanks to Chris and others who are keeping a really good eye on that gauge, we're making it work, and we're able to sustain ourselves and move forward. Is the engine warning light on? Well, it was, kind of glowing, pretty intensely there for a little bit, but we got through that. But then we also have to look through the rearview mirror, and hopefully COVID is just disappearing as fast as it possibly can. Maybe not. But fast on its heels, we also know that there's a recession coming, and there's going to be new work that has to be done because of new pressures that are there, that are on farmers, that are on the consumers. And we've always got to be looking ahead and not getting distracted even by all that bad news on the radio that I just shared with you. We don't need more distracted drivers. The board and the staff here have to be focused on what's directly ahead of us. And there are questions about what that might be. I mean, we have the opportunities of value-added foods, and that seems to be something that we're trying to build on. We're still trying to figure out if these online markets and the apps and other things, we know they're disruptive. Are they disruptive in a good way, or is there a way we can leverage those really to our benefit and therefore to the benefit of the community? There's the necessity of food safety, which is also a pretty intense burden as well. So how do we actually deal with that in a positive way? One of the things that worries me the most in the next generation of farmers who are going to step in, and it's not just the small-scale diversified farmers. Who are the farmers who are going to step into places like where I live in the Meadowee Valley and take over, those larger operations? What do we do? Because otherwise, the big farmers from New York, they're already doing it. They're coming in, and we're just an outpost, for their manure lagoons essentially, and the cropping and other things that we may or may not appreciate. We've got nutrition issues. I believe the number is 42% have 2 or more food-related chronic diseases. We haven't built a better food system. Maybe it's more efficient in some ways. It's not necessarily better. There are advantages that we built in, but really that's sort of the nexus point of where we are. How do we change this system? And does it mean enough to do it as a community? And I'll leave you with a thought. I think I was really fortunate to spend about 10 days traveling with Vandana Shiva a couple of years ago, and we were traveling through the Northeast, and so lots of really great conversations in the car, and lots of good quiet moments. We just both needed to chill out, but it was just kind of watching her think all the time, wondering where did all these ideas come from. But one of the things that she impressed upon me and audiences around was, this has to happen at the community level. That is the solution. The next stage of that solution is binding those communities together and making sure that that work is integrated as much as possible. That's how we scale. We don't scale in sort of this traditional economic sense. We scale by virtue of doing the good work in our home communities, combining with others like the Center for Agricultural Economy, figuring out some of the distribution things there, folks down in Brattleboro. that, in my view, is really, it's the only way forward. And so I'm just super grateful for everything that, you know, this board and others have done. As I was mentioning earlier, it's an amazing staff. Right now, the board is just an incredible group of people, I think, who really are, it's very balanced. We've got vision, we've got pragmatism, you know, and that's what we need. We need that tension, you know, in order to survive and thrive and sort of see our way forward. And we're really lucky that we have that. So it's a real honor and privilege to be among everyone here. So thank you.